Today we'll be discussing transaction and relationship in the balance. You know what relationship is. It's how you interact with others. It's social discourse. It's getting to know the other person, and the other person getting to know you. It's living life and sharing some of life together. It's relationship, whether that's immediate in a brief situation or longer term. Transaction. You know what transaction is? It's doing something. It's getting something accomplished. It's productivity. It's business the way we think of it. All cultures put transaction and relationship in the balance. And how they do that hugely defines their culture. I landed at the airport in Senegal along with Dave DePaul and a small group of Americans. Dave had a trusted friend in his U.S. business who was going to meet us at the airport. And there he was as we got onto the tarmac, Mr. Seydou. Mr. Seydou asked us for our passports and put them in a bag. He took them to the guard at the immigration booth and had some discussion about them. And then he waved us through, and there we were, the privileged Americans coming through. Mr. Seydou became our shepherd through immigration. Getting us through immigration and passport control was Mr. Seydou's initial assignment, but he made himself available in all sorts of other ways. You'll need a small van. Let me go to the market for you. I know where we can find that, etc., etc. Well, a few days later, I was back at the airport with my local host, and we were trying to locate some arrivals flying in from Uganda. So Mr. Seydou met us again. This time, there were some issues preventing the Ugandans from exiting the airport. And after he made some calls to embassies, and that didn't work, he said, "I know this man who's in charge of the airport." So there we are, wandering a quarter of a mile away through the maze of corridors, in and out of rooms of official-looking people, past a guy doing prayers on a carpet, to an office with wonderful views of the airport. We arrived, deferentially paying homage, explanations, and I wondered if cash would change hands at this point, but it didn't. This man, along with Seydou, was the insider relational worker who was going to help us navigate through the system of transactions. The point here is that Mr. Seydou was our relational advocate and running interference for us, and not in a way that was just out of the goodness of his heart. He initially had a job based on his U.S. connection, and he was extending that job with further services to us, and he expected us to understand his expectation of compensation. So on this basis, he would show up unexpectedly with a thought or solution we had not asked for, as if he were part of our plan. Well, Americans could feel railroaded by such an arrangement, the Mr. Seydou pop-up concierge, but Seydou was merely offering to do something based on the relationship he was building with us. Based on our need, he was saying, "You know me, and I'll do a good job for you." Well, there's shysters everywhere, but this relationship grew. What I'm saying is that some spark of relationship is, for some industrious, well-meaning people, the way in. While this may seem awkward or uncommon in your scheme of values, it may sometimes resonate with your sense of need for efficient transactions that are outside the system. In many places, there's a parallel or underground transactional system built on relationships, but there's also the above-ground system. Our cultural experts are saying that whole cultures and the people in those cultures are ultimately driven from one perspective, either the transactional or the other, the relational. Are you most concerned about relating to others, or most concerned about getting something done, broadly in life, in community, in business? Well, probably both. But in cross-cultural interactions, the relational piece may be about spending 8 or 10 hours together with your friend, the businessman, his colleagues, and his family. In other cultures, they don't draw the same lines we do: business, family, social networks. For the other culture businessman, the line between relational and transactional may be entirely blurry. You might say, "Well, I know the importance of getting to know the other guy. Have him over for a barbecue, whatever." Yeah, but probably that doesn't hold a candle to his expectations. In a global setting, how do Americans look? Well, the answer is transactional, or strongly oriented towards identifying and completing a task. In a global setting, much of the world begins with sharing life. If there's no relationship, there's no significant transacting. Business together is far less about doing things together, about making money, about productivity, about building something together. Seems strange? Depth and quantity of relationship often far surpasses an American's idea An American may say, oh yes, I made friends with that person last week. What's that mean? LinkedIn, to what? That's not about entrusting the other person with your wallet or your son, which is intrinsic to the notion of almost family. You might become, in another culture, almost family. You can move in that direction. There. You may either be in the relational network, and when I say family, I mean large kinship network. You may be in that network, or you may be out of it. Relationship and transaction are always at work simultaneously. The question is, in what measure of balance? Give this some thought as you engage non-Westerners. Are you willing to develop significant relationships? How will you get to relationship and familiarity? Honestly, this isn't so much about the details of appropriate cultural behavior as it is about learning to care about the details of someone else's life. If this is not your strong suit as an American, consider trying to study and learn. What does a non-Westerner sense and expect as relationship? Find people, ask them. Even here, you can learn a lot. If you feel your business transactions with Asians, Africans, and Arabs are inefficient or undefined, what are they saying? What are they thinking? They're probably thinking about relationships with Americans are incoherent, sparse, and that Americans see them as tools, as a means to an end, and not a genuine partner to the end. In some measure, this is about integrity. Will you be you? Will you allow yourself to be known to and entrusted by them? Enough to be part of their relational circle, within which there is also energy for transactions to occur. The Arabs want to begin with a meal, but the Americans want to get off the plane and transact business. They may be thinking, the last thing I want to do, though I may do it, is to agree with your well-crafted written plan or sign your contract. The first thing I want to know is, can this American guy who is proposing all this be trusted? And can he trust me? All his written stuff makes me think he doesn't value my word. Consider an executive who is part of a Latin American business. She's part of an important meeting scheduled for Thursday. She gets the flu on Wednesday, and her Latin American boss might change the date of the meeting. But the American boss says, oh, so sorry, I can fill you in on the details. That is, the transaction beats all. We're moving ahead with our meeting, whether you, person, are there or not. And in the patron system, the Godfather system found in Latin America, it's a system of social relationships. Motivations in these cultures are not tied to achievement, but to the relationships. Relationships lead to maintenance and gain. It's about social structure. Then there's Mrs. Lim, an Asian manager, who resists being promoted. She calls in sick to avoid the promotion. Why would you do that? Because harmonious relationships are far more important to her than an individualized reward. She doesn't want to stand out from colleagues and embarrass them, or to be embarrassed herself by standing out. Why are people acting the way they are? Do not assume it's because they are off-model. Just because the work and business model is the American one that seems obvious and sane to you. They're working on some model, aren't they? Well, Mr. Thomas is a local African who owned a construction business in a major African city for 25 years. And despite his US-based education and sensibilities, his workers retain local cultural values. And one of those is, you, boss, are my personal boss. You are above me in status, like the patron, but you're loyal to me because I'm part of your social network, which is indistinct from your business network. Thomas reports this: a number of times I fired some workers only for them to come to my house the following dawn with their parents and some community elders to ask for pardon. Can you imagine that? Thomas says in such cases it's difficult to decide not to give that worker a second chance. Many of them see me as their friend and so are surprised that I don't understand and accept their ways. It's this whole issue of valuing relationship even over the truth sometimes. I felt like dismissing some of them for non-performance. Well, Thomas was befuddled by the people of his own culture. He eventually started regular forums in which he and his supervisory staff discussed values and decisions as much as they discussed the nuts and bolts of getting business done. David Marantz, in his book, African Friends and Money Matters, points out the dominance of relational energy in African settings. It's the same in much of the world. He says personal, family, or private interests are more highly valued than larger organizational or public interests. Preferences given to employing kin over non-kin, that's a normal expression of family responsibility and solidarity. People who are less qualified are employed for particular positions. Why? Because they're in my social network. Thus, private interests are placed above qualifications and competence. Well, what's this mean for accountability? Because of loyalty to private interests, accountability for task accomplishment is lessened. Motivation to work conscientiously is dependent on relationship, not on task or achievement. This may sound, again, completely out of line with your sense of business. But if you're engaging business in a culture with these values, and you very well might be, then you have to learn their values and figure out how yours fit and determine how to interact with management and labor and business regulators. Can you be a collaborator there? Finally, some thoughts about planning. How does planning work in a non-American setting? And what's the role of relationship? You'll want to get things done and look ahead. You'll want to plan and be efficient. This is your core sensibility. But how are they thinking in the other culture? Well, about 5 years ago, I began as an online mentor and teacher for 3 West African master's degree students, men who are mature leaders of mission agencies. And 2 years later, I visited them and their families in Accra, Ghana. In the interim, I made a significant relationship with Professor Humphrey from an influential Ghana school while he was studying in Philadelphia. I had also spent many, many hours in person on site in Senegal and in conversation with a like-minded missionary colleague who is an African. The 5 of us connected at a Pan-African conference, and I stayed in their homes, met their staffs, and saw what they did. My vision has been to develop a trainer corps comprised of West Africans. We all have had a common interest, helping workers make work and ministry happen in other cultures. But the planning and the implementation of a substantive, ongoing corporate initiative has had to come from them, not from me, or else it simply won't get done. I don't live there. Turns out, by which I mean I learned this about them and they learned this about each other, we have one administrator, one guy who starts new things, one guy who takes everyone's pulse, one with clear, solid values, our conscience, and one who can turn a crowd into a family in 5 minutes. We added a 6th, a key networker, into one huge group of leaders we all want to influence. But we all had to learn this. We had to learn each other's skills and capabilities. Add this, each of these men travels about with a younger person that they're mentoring. Well, great, more workers, but I had to learn how that works when we function as a team. I interact with everyone at least once a week, email, Skype, etc. But usually this means all of us interact because they're collectivists and everyone always hits reply all. There are no private conversations. I see my role as a coach, but ahead of that is relationship. Not only are these men dear, dear friends, God has given us a connection and we've grown to trust each other. When the brothers gather in Accra, they let me know what happened almost immediately and assign me a task. Sometimes they jokingly call me their slave. Well, getting to that kind of familiarity has taken time. I've over and over resisted my ace planning skills. My best planning skill has been calculated waiting. Planning emerged. The plans became obvious when the intentions, skills, context, and trust happened, but not ahead of that. These brilliant and industrious men, they're going to change the intensity and skill of a missionary movement growing out of West Africa. After 4 years, we've held conferences, met in 3 countries. On both coasts of the US, we've had a prototype field-tested workshop series. We have core values, core examples, cases, instructional strategies, and basic curriculum that we all agree on. But writing down was last. We easily wrote down the core values and procedures after 4+ years of being together and learning with, from, and about each other. We do not have a formal organization. Maybe we will, maybe not. Our productivity is based on high personal commitment. So whether you are considering the overall picture of what you want to do or are engaged there in day-to-day details, relationship and transaction are in a balance. And in the other cultures, you will need to learn a relational way that is far heavier in the balance than it is in the USA.